横のレミです。3月13日木曜日の為替レポートニューヨークレビューをお伝えします。13日のアメリカ株式市場は反発しました。ダウ工業株30週平均は前日比35ドル50セント高の 12,145 ドル74セント、ナスダック総合株価指数は 19.74 ポイント高の 2263.61 で終えた。朝方ダウ平均は一時230ドル安まで下落しました。午後の取引でスタンダード&ポアーズ S&P のリポートでサブプライムローン関連の評価損について収束が視野に入ったとの見通しを示したことを受け、金融株に買いが入りました。13日のニューヨーク外国為替市場で円相場は大幅に続伸しました。ドル円は前日比1円10銭円高ドル安の100円60銭から70銭で取引を終えた。信用リスクやアメリカ景気への不安が強く、円買いドル売りが先行しました。株式相場が上げに転じたことを受けて利益確定目的などの円売りが優勢となりました。ニューヨーク市場の円の高値は99円96銭でした。また円は対ユーロで続伸しました。前日比95銭円高ユーロ安の157円30銭から40銭で取引を終えた。またユーロは対ドルで続伸、一時 1.5646 ドルまで上昇し、導入以来の高値を更新しました。それではトムソンファイナンシャルの通貨ストラテジストジョール・クルーガーさんとのインタビューをご覧ください。
Well, it's been quite a few sessions across all the markets, including foreign exchange. We saw dollar yen breach 100 yen for the first time since October of 1995. But downside pressure on the pair has somewhat subsided into the New York close. But given what's going on in the credit markets as well as fundamentals here in the U.S., let's start out by talking about what is causing overall dollar weakness and what scenarios will lead to a turnaround.
Sure. Well, generally it's the same old story with the dollar weakness. A lot of what you have now is a confluence of technical and fundamental drivers right now. It's the Fed on the fundamental side, it continues to be interest rate differentials, and the market's pricing in another 75 basis point cut from the Fed coming up. On the technical side, we continue to see the market sort of moving in a parabolic fashion across the board. Dollar yen breaking below 100, etc. And we see these levels going. So from a technical perspective, it's just a question of at some point we're going to need to find a base or depending on in dollar yen as well. But we've moved, we continue to move intensely to the downside in dollar yen, and it's just going to be a question of sort of where we're going to find support in that pair.
And indeed, Joel, next week we do have the Fed meeting as well as the Fed rate announcement. And it's interesting to see how in the past few sessions since the Fed announced its latest plan to inject liquidity in coordination with the central banks, that has also somewhat subsided in both the equity market as well as the FX market. But dollar yen did touch a low of 99.77. So given that the dollar is falling across the board and there has been some talk of more intervention, how has your forecast changed for dollar yen?
No, dollar yen, it continues. I continue to see downside going forward. The fact that we broke a key level today at 100, I don't think that will create any. It might create a short-term bounce. Certainly, like I was saying, technically we're oversold, and we could be subject to a bounce. But the overall picture for dollar yen is lower, and the reason being, technically, again, we keep making lower lows and lower highs. So there's no reason to be sensing any form of a shift. Fundamentally, several years ago when dollar yen was trading down at these levels, we bounced quite hard. There was a lot of BOJ intervention. Today, the story is not the same because if we remember several years ago, the yen crosses a lot. The euro versus the yen, and the Aussie versus the yen, and the Kiwi versus the yen, etc., and sterling versus the yen. Excuse me. They were a lot lower. They were trading a lot lower at that time, which created a lot more pressure for the BOJ. Now that these crosses over the past several years have sort of been at elevated levels, dollar yen at 100 is not as scary as it once was. So I don't see any reason why we can continue to go lower. Short term 99.30 would be the next level to watch.
Okay, now that we've covered dollar yen, let's turn our focus over to euro dollar. The pair does continue to hit new record highs, and it is hard to call a top. And the currency exchange rate right now may be a frightening prospect for U.S. tourists going abroad to Europe. But since we need to assess the fundamentals here in the eurozone as well as the U.S., what are technicals indicating right now, and what levels are you watching?
Right. Okay. So technically, I can, as convincingly as I can say this, I do believe that we are near a top. I would look at 157 as a level where we look to put in a major sort of medium-term top, and the reason being, if people would take a look at the charts or sort of a medium-term basis, we had been consolidating several weeks ago for several months, weeks in a 143 to 150 area. So when we broke 150 to the upside, from a technical perspective, it opened a fresh upside extension. Now, where that extends to is if you look at 143 to 150, and then you project that going higher, that's about 7 big figures. So we're looking at about 157 as a top, and given how we've accelerated, I don't see why that's not a realistic possibility. That's on the technical side.
以上トムソンファイナンシャルの通貨ストラテジストジョール・クルーガーさんとのインタビューでした。 ForexTV ニューヨークのレミがお伝えしました。最新の為替情報については ForexTV ジャパンをご覧ください。